This is Kyojin no Hoshi, the first full-length sports anime. It's adapting a manga that started only 2 years prior, and wouldn't conclude for another 3 years. This is the earliest example we know of the curse. It's a problem many anime fans know all too well. The curse is that anime always adapts manga at a rate faster than the chapters can be made. So head writer of Kyojin no Hoshi, Haruya Yamazaki, came up with a way to ward off the curse. Kyojin no Hoshi would stall for time, recapping what had already happened, embellishing various scenes, even inventing some new ones. They say there was even a time where they stretched one play over the course of a whole episode. This is the earliest example we know of anime filler, a cure to anime's curse. The modern solution to this curse is for the anime to take breaks, releasing the story in seasons instead of one continuous streak. But that strategy has its own shortcomings. One Punch Man's first season was as good as it was because the proper staff was available, who moved on to something else by season 2. It's not just the studio, it was the people behind it. MHA lost its character designer between seasons 3 and 4, which is when fans were starting to have problems with the anime. These long-running productions allow the studio to keep the staff intact, at least for a lot longer than just 12 or 24 episodes. It's more of a steady gig. And while every anime adaptation is subject to be quote-unquote cancelled partways in, long-running or not, each break is yet another chance that the anime will never come back. I'm unsure if Naruto would have gotten a complete anime if it didn't run continuously for 15 years. The curse would still haunt Naruto, so that anime chose to use filler instead. Filler is what it sounds like. Scenes or whole episodes that have no tangible effect or relevance to the story, and are made to stall or, quote, fill time for whatever reason. Yes, there are other reasons to use filler than curing the curse. Naruto's anime continued to use a lot of filler after the manga was already done. They stalled for time so that certain canon episodes looked as great as possible. Naruto used several different types of filler. Yes, there are different types of filler as well, including recap, adapting other content besides the manga, like Naruto's light novels, fleshing out moments or fights, making them more complex, or, most commonly, inventing completely new stories. Anime original content. Unfortunately, that cure comes with a stigma. Since the staff can't step on the toes of the main story in fear of contradicting it later, or else deviating so strongly it can never rejoin the story proper, this tends to leave anime original content like this feeling toothless, useless, worthless. And to insert myself here, yeah, most of it's not worth describing or even mentioning, let alone dissecting, but I do think this subject deserves nuance. There's different approaches to insert original content into a story that are more effective and not. It shouldn't all be written off merely because it's not canon or doesn't move the plot forward. Original Naruto has about 90 anime original episodes allotted almost entirely at the end. This was the opportune moment because after this point in the story, there would be a 2-year time skip. This 90-episode filler is comprised of 14 standalone episodes and 17 story arcs that range from 2 to 6 episodes each. Already, we have 2 different approaches: episodic stories or a more elaborate story. To me, the standalone episodes tended to be the most fun. They were often framed as lighthearted based on their premise. Many fans single out episode 101, where Team 7 attempts to reveal Kakashi's face under the mask. There's actually a second attempt involving the other Genin in Shippuden 469. I also recommend episode 193, where Rock Lee opens a dojo. These episodes were even the most conceptually interesting of the bunch because they pack all their ideas into one succinct 20 minutes, as the best episodic series do. Like 174, where Naruto is tasked with babysitting a spoiled rich kid, or 186, where if Naruto laughs during a funeral, he fails the mission. It was easier for me to relax and enjoy myself during these episodes. They were a fun romp with the characters we already enjoy. The latter approach was, unfortunately, a lot more common. Each mini-arc is structured basically the same. It's a mission where Naruto and at least 2 other genin meet anime original characters and help solve anime original problems and beat an anime original bad guy. Or Kabuto, once. The original characters are almost always the worst part about this content. They're never as interesting as even the tertiary characters of Naruto. It's almost automatically less interesting the moment you introduce some rando I've never seen before, doesn't have a cool design, doesn't exist in the story writ large, they don't have any connection or relation to the characters we already know, or anything that fleshes out the story or setting in a interesting, tangible way. Especially if that character is made the focal character, and it really tries to get me to care. It's a really high bar to overcome, and I don't think Naruto ever manages to pass it, and few anime do. The scenarios themselves can be somewhat interesting, but the execution is only ever mild, decent. You get unremarkable dialogue, an impressive piece of animation here or there, but nothing worth the whole arc. The characters we actually like don't get that much in the way of remarkable moments, or they're just copies of the cool moments they've already gotten. And the worst part of this filler is it's very obvious that Naruto is involved in literally every single episode simply by virtue of being the titular character, and not for any meaningful reason. I think it's a waste with how many other characters that they could have used that get benched to make room for him. I think the longer an arc was, the less interesting it became, because that's how much they wanted me to engage with what's going on. But when the viewer knows nothing they're watching ultimately matters to the story, it can be difficult to become invested. And while the solution to this at first seems to be, oh, just forget that it's filler, just pretend that it's canon, that's no easy task. Sooner or later, if the viewer was invested this far into Naruto, they will definitely start wondering what's going on. Hey, when's Naruto gonna leave the village with Jiraiya? Hey, what about the Akatsuki? When are they gonna make their move? You know, when's Sasuke gonna show up? None of that happens until Shippuden. None of these original characters will ever be brought up again. None of the characters will ever remember any of this. None of it matters for shit. And that's all by design. Naruto is very clearly spinning its wheels with these episodes. That is its function, to keep the staff around, to keep the time slot, to keep active while we wait for more chapters to come out. And that becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. So I say, don't even try to ignore it. Understand that what you are watching is filler. Now, I personally wouldn't condemn any of these episodes as unwatchable garbage. And aside from Naruto being forced into every episode, it doesn't feel repetitive either. And most of it still felt authentically Naruto. But I can only make mild recommendations for 2 arcs. I enjoyed the 4-episode Beetle Hunt, because it's got very good Hinata content, and the 2-episode arc with the Imposters, because it's got very good Hinata content. Even less fun, however, was Shippuden's anime original content. It tallies over 200 episodes spread throughout the 500-episode series, as early as episode 57, and as late as the last 20 episodes of the show. At 9 different points, it would run for over 12 consecutive episodes each. The longest stretch was during the Infinite Tsukiyomi, for 24 episodes. And what makes that stretch demonstrably worse was that it aired after the manga had already finished, 10 months ago. The worst part about these Shippuden filler episodes is that unlike Part 1 Naruto, which all happened after the story content was done, they frequently try to blend these arcs in with the adapted content to make it seem like they're part of the story, either placing them in between major story arcs and writing it in such a way to have it flow seamlessly, or placing them at a point sometime in the past to make it seem more legitimate. 3 of these Shippuden filler arcs strongly feature the 3 tails, the 6 tails, and the 7 tails. If you haven't seen Naruto and don't know what I'm talking about, thank you for watching anyway. Basically, there's 9-tailed beasts sealed inside humans. Naruto has the 9 tails, Gaara has the 1 tails, there's a recurring character later with the 8 tails, and the bad guys are trying to collect them all. These 6 other characters are technically important to the story, but they aren't given any attention besides their name and face. Which is fine. The story is still great without all of them being fleshed out. The issue is that these original arcs try to give some of those characters that missing attention. But any of that detail still doesn't affect the story writ large. You might get one scene of Naruto being like, oh my god, I remember him, but like, that's it. It's not as additive as you would hope. And even then, these arcs end up focusing much less on the Jinchuriki character in favor of other anime original characters with their own anime original problems. And no matter how much we learn about them, they still serve a function in the story where that detail doesn't matter, with each of them being unceremoniously captured and killed at the very end, and our heroes are none the wiser. It sucks! And that still leaves 3 of the 6 characters that still don't get anything! What's the point? The filler feels pointless already. If you're going to make anime original content for the purpose of filler, at least make it fun, and not accidentally emphasize its pointlessness. I would take a spontaneous beach episode or silly Halloween-themed episode over this drivel, like what Bleach did. I vastly prefer Bleach's approach to anime original content in general. The Arrancar saga was so long, there was no good place to naturally weave in anime original content to make it seem like it was canon. So each anime original episode or arc explicitly exists in an alternate universe. It's addressed by the anime itself.
アランカルとの戦いはまだ続くが、それを語るのはもう少し先の話。今回からは今までとは違う新しい物語が始まる。
This makes these episodes actually easier to take seriously, and it gives the anime more freedom to be a little zanier or experimental. I love how each of these arcs actually explores a bit of the world of Bleach. The aristocratic system, the Zanpakutos, Ray guys. It's just a lot more fun. This is in contrast to Bleach's first anime original arc that, like Naruto, tries to integrate itself seamlessly with the adapted content, because it takes place between Soul Society and Arrancar. It takes itself very seriously, it's 40 episodes, and is contender for the worst story arc of anything I've ever experienced, canon or otherwise. Bount arc sucks. I don't think any of Naruto's anime original content gets that tedious or absurd. Not even the time that Naruto becomes a mecha series. Although, there was one instance where I thought that it did actively work against the anime's favor. That would be during, again, Infinite Tsukiyomi, which I'll remind you was made 10 months after the manga was already done. It's episodic to start out with, but the latter 19 episodes of that chunk, fucking 19 episodes, almost a 2-core anime, recounts, yes, an alternate reality, but it's a lot more alternate reality than I'm willing to stomach. Tsunade is reading Naruto fanfiction. It's a book written by Jiraiya and attempts to reconstruct the entire story of Naruto, kind of, except Naruto's parents are still alive, Sasuke's entire clan is still alive. Already, what the fuck is the point of that then? But they're still fighting the Akatsuki as Genin, but it's way before that they're even remotely strong enough to be even defeat them. And after a lot of different stuff, it's like, okay. The detrimental part is that it ends with a final showdown between Naruto and Sasuke. But this was before the anime actually adapted that moment for real. People were still waiting for Naruto versus Sasuke. It's over 10 months, and they still haven't gotten to it, and they're giving us this. Really? I mean, geez, the majority of that arc is whatever, but like, why would anybody want to watch this episode? Episode 450, with this extremely contrived and flaccidly executed fantasy, when the real deal was going to happen 26 episodes later. It doesn't make sense to watch when it aired. It doesn't make sense to watch years after it aired. It just doesn't make sense. There is not a single anime original arc in Shippuden that is as good or, heaven forbid, better than any of the manga arcs. But of course not. If there were, you'd probably have heard about it, right? But there's probably a lot of manga-only readers that don't know about a few notable exceptions that I do think you should go out of your way to watch. As I said earlier, some filler includes fleshing out moments or fights to make them more complex, such as one of my favorite episodes in the whole series, Shippuden Episode 82, which does adapt 2 chapters, but has mostly original content mixed in, all of which dramatically elevates the material. Shikamaru wandering the streets, playing shogi with his dad and the meltdown afterwards, meeting up with Choji and Ino at their houses before setting out on their mission. All of this with very somber and atmospheric palettes and languid pace. It's episodes like this that make me champion the medium of anime, taking already great material and making it even better. There's so much death in Naruto, but not nearly enough mourning of those deaths. I think it's because the accurate depiction of grieving might come off as boring to some. Or maybe it hits too close to home. It's slow, quiet, empty, because it's so emotionally suffocating. You can't think of anything else. This episode gets that. And not just in a, oh, it's good for a kid's show kind of way. It gives the characters time to mentally prepare and choose to go on this suicide mission. It's not just something that they're obviously going to do because they're characters in a story. This makes their choice actually daunting and believable. It's not fluff or filler. It's damn good anime. So after Pain's arc, there's a series of anime original episodes that are set in the past. And I liked a number of these episodes. In particular, episodes 176 through 78, which is a mini arc about Iruka becoming Naruto's day one homie, which I think fits great right after seeing Iruka so happy to see Naruto become the hero of the village. This arc also gives us several new missions with Team 7, which, truth be told, the story itself doesn't have that much of. My favorites being episode 189, which is a silly infiltration into a cat palace, which actually gets called back to in later anime original episodes. Episode 180, which takes place right after the Land of Waves. It's like a bonus mission with Inari, and especially episode 194, the worst three-legged race, where Naruto and Sasuke have to complete a mission with their hands stuck together. These are really fun and well-written, and the latter two are also very well animated. Speaking of well animated, some fans probably already know about Power. It's a 6-episode anime original arc that looks noticeably movie quality, as if this was supposed to be one of Naruto's anime original movies, complete with anime original characters facing off against, you get it. It's got a big fight at the end of it, looks very pretty. I was ultimately indifferent towards it, the same way I was with the other anime original arcs like this, but I figured it's worth noting here because, yeah, it's very good looking. As I said, Shippy adapts a few light novels too, so these aren't exactly anime original, but you probably didn't see these if you just read the manga. I moderately enjoyed the last 7 episodes building up to Naruto's wedding, but I especially liked Itachi's story. I loved seeing Itachi's progression and perspective before and after the massacre, from childhood through joining the Akatsuki. But if you're going out of your way to watch any anime original episodes, even if you aren't interested in Naruto at all, but still watching this video, I think everybody simply must check out episodes 480 to 483. God, I wish every manga adaptation got something like this. I wish any anime got something like this. 4 episodes, each split into 2 stories focusing on different characters' childhoods, and thematically they center on pivotal relationships. Naruto with the 3rd Hokage, Hinata with Neji and Naruto, Sasuke with Itachi, Sakura with Ino, Gaara with Yashimaru, Shikamaru with Choji and Naruto, Jiraiya with Orochimaru and Tsunade, and Kakashi with his father and Obito. Minimal action, charmingly curt dialogue, slowly paced, distinctive art style, brought to us by an auteur guest director. These episodes were directed, written, storyboarded, and key animated by the late master Osamu Kobayashi. I'll admit to not being a huge fan of his work, but these episodes completely turned me around on him. The dude was a genius. The backgrounds stand out as noticeably detailed and vast, and Kobayashi expertly reuses them for not just optimization of the production, but actually makes each episode seem more intimate in their respective settings. It limits each story to 2 or 3 locations. The music is minimized with a lot of quiet gaps, and even when there is music, the episode keeps its slow, methodic pace, sometimes in spite of the music. Kobayashi's direction is very distinct here. There's frequent dips to black to transition in meaningful ways. Tons of establishing shots and point of view shots and long takes. Shots seem often repeated to keep things simple and contained. There's special attention given to depicting nature, animals, and food realistically. But the most significant feature are the stylistic choices in the animation. While Kobayashi doesn't seem to be credited as animation director on these episodes, if you're familiar with his work, his unmistakable trademark is his flickering and quirky character expressions. His toothy grins and curvy frowns, the slight twitchy gestures and charming lopsidedness to it all. The lip flaps don't just move open and closed when they talk. There's O and E mouth shapes too, which if you recall from last video is quite the flex. It's subtle, but I think the characters blink a lot more. Which sounds like a stupid, insignificant thing to point out, right? Like what? You want me to watch these episodes for how often the characters blink? Well, kind of, yeah. These episodes are incredibly charming, thoughtful, subtle, and one of a kind. 4 of a kind. The handcrafted look of the title cards and how the last one ends with Oshimai. Like it's also so special. And it's not even like you have to poke around 500 episodes to find them. Naruto Shippuden 480. That's unmistakably the best one, because it has Hinata. And then there's a bonus 3 more directly after that. It's the perfect batch of episodes to follow up the stirring climax and finale of the whole series. But you can still appreciate them even as a non-fan. Maybe they don't objectively add to any canonical content, but you can tell Kobayashi intimately understood who these characters were and what makes them interesting. It's pretty uncharacteristic of what most manga fans might go and seek out from the anime. Usually it's the cool action animation that they'll just look up on YouTube. But if you grew up with this series, or have come to care about it at all, I think you owe these episodes your patience and attention. It's one thing to point out Naruto has filler, which it does. But it's another to consider that a problem. It's only really a problem if you were watching it as it came out, and you'd have to wait an indiscriminate amount of time, anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 months, before they continued the story. Which, I'm just saying, 2 weeks to 6 months sounds a whole lot better than waiting anywhere from 6 months to over a year for the next season. At least Naruto gave us something to watch during that wait. It might not have been all that good most of the time, but I'd hate to have waited all that time for the next season only for it to look like ass, or have its own adaptation problems. I get how it might be torture while it's airing, and you have no idea when or for how long the anime will be doing something other than what viewers want. But we're years out of that tunnel now. The filler guides are complete. I don't think filler is a valid complaint, assuming the show is finished. Skip the filler if it bothers you, and if you do watch the filler and don't enjoy it, it's not a big deal. This is why I like to be an informed viewer and know what I'm getting into, instead of watching seasonals as they're coming out. I did that for like 3 years and got burnt out from trying countless titles that might be good off the cover and staff, only to disappoint. Just saying, I found a lot of joy in exploring my back catalog that are reportedly good the whole time, instead of being dragged along by the current seasonals hoping they stay good the whole time. I get using filler guides seems like a hassle. Why can't it be as easy as clicking next episode? Why do I have to skip all over the place? Well, if you were willing to commit to 426 canon episodes anyway, using a guide telling you what episodes to skip is not a big deal. But you could just as easily not use any guides and just watch the show as normal. Are you afraid you'll enjoy Naruto less if you watch them? Is that it? I didn't skip any of the filler and I still really enjoyed Naruto. I don't find almost any of the filler to be damaging to the experience. Keyword, almost. If all this filler meant we got a full faithful adaptation of a 700 chapter manga, on top of a bunch of side content, whereas countless other manga that are less than a third of Naruto's length aren't nearly as lucky, and fuck, the anime even looks pretty good to boot! I welcome this filler, and go so far as to say it's a good thing. This show is a damn miracle. Not because it has filler, but because it's a complete adaptation. Thanks in part to the filler. This practice doesn't typically happen anymore. They avoid the curse of catching up by releasing season by season. Or I guess season by movie. Oops! But with how good some of Naruto's filler content was, it makes me wonder what the filler could have been like. Oh well. Guess we'll never know. I love anime openings and endings, and I want to use Naruto as my excuse to finally discuss them in a video. I figured this was a good chance, since Naruto has not just one OP and one ED, it has a huge variety to better illustrate what I'm talking about. With a grand total of 29 OPs and 55 EDs! I think my approach to studying these sequences differs from a lot of traditional analysis. So I'll first talk in depth about those particular qualities of OPs and EDs that I think make them effective, using Naruto as the example, and then use those qualities to analyze my personal favorite OP from both Naruto and favorite from Shippuden. Now, there's certainly been plenty of OP analysis before, usually by analyzing the choice of visuals and what they mean, or sometimes analysis of the song, the lyrics and its relation to the story. And while all of that is interesting and valuable, that's not really what makes a great OP to me. Just because an OP is packed with hidden meaning and is actually really profound doesn't factor in how memorable and fun the OP is to watch. I hardly ever look up or pay attention to the lyrics of a song, and sometimes the visuals go by so fast I'm not soaking in as much value as I might be by pausing and playing it back in slow motion. That's not usually how I, or arguably most viewers, engage with these sequences. It's a more basic and implicit form of enjoyment. The music grooves or builds hype. The visuals are fun or cool, and the two of them complement each other. This is especially important when you're watching the anime and not just the OP by itself on YouTube or Twitter. Don't get me wrong, some OPs are so damn good that they can be enjoyed by themselves, as encapsulated versions of the anime. Sometimes they're too good and are arguably better than the anime they're attached to. But it's always important for me to not treat the OPs or EDs as isolated pieces of media. They're a part of the anime viewing experience. They should be appreciated in the context of the episode and the context of the whole show. For example, at what point in the episode do they play the OP? If the anime has multiple story arcs, does the OP properly represent the episodes it's attached to? Or is it more vague in general? If there's multiple OPs, like Naruto, what's one OP's relation to the other OPs before and after it? Everyone can relate to switching to a new OP and it's not as good as the older one. How does that affect the experience? How about when a new OP or ED shows up? What's the point in the show when that change happens? And how does that make the viewer feel? It's the responsibility of the staff to not just make a good OP, but to know how to use it. It doesn't matter how much an OP slaps if it's relegated to mostly a filler arc. When you hit play on episode 1, what is the first assortment of things they show you? Here the anime is not just trying to sell the story itself, but also their proficiency at telling it. Do these guys making the anime seem like they know what they're doing? A savvy audience can sometimes tell that. For Naruto, both original and Shippuden, I don't think either first episodes start out all that strong, because neither of them start with their OPs, but a cold open instead. The vast majority of episodes in original Naruto do start with the OP, but Shippuden is a lot more erratic, flip-flopping between cold open and OP with virtually no pattern or sense of logic. To me, that's a very unreliable artistic choice. Either do the OP at the start, or have a cold open. Don't mix the two. Almost 3/4 of Shippuden starts with a cold open. If your audience can't anticipate or rely on when an OP is coming, they're much less likely to take the time to enjoy it, especially for a plot-driven anime like Naruto where they're anxious to see what happens next. It makes the OP feel like an obligation rather than a proper tone setter. Why have one at all at that point? Honestly, it's rare when a cold open really works for me. Having the OP play first every time is a great way to set the tone and energy of an episode. It's harder to set the tone for something that started 8 minutes ago. This choice affects the moment when an OP changes too. I was pretty let down that the first instance of original OP2 was on the first and only recap episode of original Naruto. What a disappointing way for an audience to first experience that OP. Not a fan. But I guess if you know to skip the one recap episode in original Naruto, you don't have to worry about it. I think having the first instance of a new OP happen at the beginning of the episode is the most optimal way of surprising the audience with it. Because in a weird way, it feels like progress. They've reached a new stage of the show. And unfortunately, Shippuden only does that with a few of its OPs. If a cold open makes the audience ultimately care less about the OP, why should they care if it's different? All of that is just OP placement. What about the first impression of the OP itself? Like YouTube videos, the first 10 seconds are arguably the most important. It's the hook that entices the viewer whether to skip the OP after the first watch, or rewatch it over and over. Both the initial splash of music and the first images you see, I encourage you to look up the compilations of Naruto OPs and click around just to see the first 10 seconds. Notice how strong they hook you to watch the whole thing. Original Naruto's first OP is great, I think. It's got the fade from black as the music eases in, and 3 guitar riffs sync to breathtaking shots of Team 7. I'm really smitten with this first shot of Naruto. You hardly ever see characters mouthing the lyrics of the OP. It's so earnest and charming. Contrastly, I feel like Shippuden OP1 takes a bit too long to warm up. It's just like the other OP with the sunrise, but the shot has more contrast and less color. It's not a flattering angle of Naruto either. Why did they make this OP in widescreen, but the rest of the episode is still in 4:3, so they have to put these white bars on the top and bottom? Other OPs that make a stronger impression to me would be OG2, OG5, Shippy 2, and 16. As it happens, this applies to EDs too, but that's more like the first 5 seconds. The last impression of an episode can sometimes be as important as the first impression. The first few seconds of an ED allows you to emotionally digest the episode you just finished. It can make you feel a variety of things, or nothing at all if done poorly. Sometimes I like an intense contrast between an episode and an ED. This has been made fun of a few times, but no, it's genuinely really fun. With like a brutal end to the episode, it's matched with a bubbly, happy ED. Zeta Gundam is like the ultimate example. I guess there's lots of fans who skip EDs on principle. And if you're choosing to binge very plot-driven anime like Naruto, I don't blame them for it. But consideration for EDs as parts of the work is still important to me. These are often the spots where I allow myself to take the time to gather my thoughts or consider my feelings towards the episode, and the show as a whole. The ED has the opportunity to uplift that process. And when it doesn't, it's a waste at best and a potential detriment at worst. Truth be told, I don't think Naruto has the strongest set of EDs. Unfortunately, not many anime do. Probably why you don't exactly see a lot of what's in an ED. If I were to pin one overall problem with why EDs aren't as beloved as OPs, there's often this vibe of noticeably less creativity or resources going towards them. Not always. There's countless exceptions. I just see it as a general trend, and I think I get why. Since they're at the end of the episode, it needs to work even harder to hook the audience to stick around. Not that you need EDs to be as lavish as OPs. In fact, I find it kind of weird when an ED has the same energy as an OP. I like them being wind downs to contrast the OPs winding up. I still know that it's possible to make an ED that fans won't want to skip despite itching for the next episode. And a change in art style is one of the best ways to accomplish that. EDs, and sometimes OPs, are often the only opportunity for the anime to present itself in a drastically unique style. I love them functioning as vignettes that you'd never see from the show itself. Most of Naruto's OPs use visuals that are consistent with the show's style, but they go crazy with the EDs. There's a broad variety of textures and forms of animation that are interesting and fun. I want to credit the unit director who was responsible for most of Naruto's original EDs. He basically is the one that set this trend of using the EDs in this experimental, stylish way. That would be, that's right, I remember from last video, Toshiyuki Suru. This guy really is just the best. This choice of a unique style also makes them distinctive and memorable from each other. Since there's literally 55 of them, it's kind of a tall order to keep track of them all. I personally prefer OPs or EDs that either tell a concise narrative or are themed in a certain way. Even better if the ED is relevant to what's going on in the show, like the OP. Original doesn't really have anything like that, but Chibi does accomplish this a lot better. While EDs ultimately have a higher threshold of retaining an audience due to being at the end, I find that their biggest problem is that they lack in OP's arguably greatest strength. You've probably noticed at the start of each of these Naruto videos, I love making AMVs. While there are a number of factors to making an effective AMV, I'd go as far as to say the most important is how well the visuals match the audio. Synchronization. There might be a more common lingo, but that's what I call it. With OPs, some fans care more about the song than the visuals, and others care the other way around. But good visuals and good music ultimately don't mean shit if they're not complementing one another. The first thing I want to stress is that it's not about how often the two are synced. If you sync visuals to every word or to every syllable in the audio, it could be appealing and effective for a little while, but gets too predictable and tedious super quick. It's a delicate balance. You want to be— Hey! See what I mean? You want to be on the nose, but you don't want to break the nose. It can be fun to choose points in the music that aren't immediately obvious, but still click instantly with the viewer. Cuts are the easiest thing to sync, but it can be even more satisfying if the subject within those cuts also sync with their action. So already you have an option to either do a 1-2 with different shots, or a 1-2 with cut and action. Patterns and repetitions are great for emphasis and having your audience follow along in a satisfying way, but there are better and worse choices for what you want to repeat and for how long. It's important to recognize if something might get annoying. You can break the monotony up with something unexpected or have the visuals progress in some way to disguise how repetitive it gets. You just don't want it to be predictable, right? For the stuff that I make, the song dictates everything. I can move the visuals around to be right where the song is, but there's far less wiggle room the other way around. The most I can do to mess with the audio that wouldn't be immersion breaking is rearrange chunks of the song that make it still flow naturally, but kept within the amount of time that I want, which might not be the whole song. Real anime OPs have to do the same thing, taking the official songs and trimming them down to 90 seconds or less. There's an art to that too, and sometimes it's done so well I prefer the shorter cut over listening to the whole song. When you think about it, OPs technically have more freedom than the AMVs I make when it comes to their visuals, since it's all original animation that can be storyboarded and animated however you want, to fit the music precisely. However, creating animation to fit precisely with music is harder than you might expect. Timing is everything with animation, which should take priority over whether it lands on a music cue. If the animation doesn't quite last as long as you need it to, then the cut might not sync well, or the motion within the animation doesn't quite match the flow of the song. Despite the creative control, the execution is a whole other story. So that's probably why OPs are not as blisteringly synced as an AMV can sometimes be. The hardest thing about synchronization, to me, might be the single hardest thing about art in general, and that's knowing when to stop. When art is this satisfying to make, it can become pretty self-indulgent. You keep getting ideas and want to pile on more and more. But if you do that, nobody will appreciate the cool shit you made an hour ago before you smothered it in other cool shit. And that's not even considering any indecisiveness or self-doubt or slavishly rewatching what you made 50 times, because, God, it's so fucking cool.
You are my friend.
Cool shit is subjective, of course. But there's a special brand of cool, exclusive to OPs. You might have seen compilations of every anime opening ever. A lot of people will be quick to call them cliches, but they're overused for a reason. Many OP tropes capitalize on the excitement of seeing these characters in motion. Especially for adaptations of static media like manga, it's exciting to see these characters come to life in a dimensional space. So the most effective visual tropes of OPs are what's intrinsic to animation. Every scene of the OP would be better animated some way, either the subject itself or their environment. That makes it sound like an unreasonable demand. I'm not saying the OP needs to be all constantly moving smoothly on ones. Anime has built a reputation for its use of smart, limited animation. You can get a lot of mileage out of slight movements, like eyes opening, hair blowing, or a smile. The primary cool factor to an OP is that spectacle of animation. Maybe it's a fight scene or other major set piece. Even one outstanding sequence is enough to make it a classic. But honestly, those aren't even my favorite parts. My favorite thing an OP can do, and thankfully they do it a lot, is that turn to the camera. It's so cool! The OP is the rare instance where a character can look right at the camera and the viewer feels like they're actually looking at them. It's very compelling if you're not a cynical I said earlier that cool shit is subjective, and that's also true for one's tolerance of what could be seen as cringe? Yeah, cringe is probably the best word for it. I've been discussing visuals a lot, but it is fun when the music is also cringe, or has a silly moment. But it's real delicate. This is the fastest path to making your OP a joke. Remember, you want to be on the nose, not break the nose. There are definitely some cringe moments in these OPs that really work for me, and others that don't. OPs have the unique advantage of being abstractions of the story, bending reality to show parallels, metaphors, and symbolism. It's easy for the audience to suspend their disbelief in the context of a credit sequence. You don't even need to feature events that actually happen. Though you should probably be careful with that for fear of misleading and disappointing the audience. But if you do feature events that actually happen, there's a threshold of teasing the audience of things to come and outright spoiling. Show me who's gonna fight who. Don't show me a character death. Don't get me wrong, I want new information. An OP that just spins its wheels and shows you nothing makes me feel like the show is spinning its wheels. Several of the early Ninja War OPs are ass, in part because they aren't giving a whole lot of information that we don't already know. For that matter, you know what's cool? Showing me things that seem to actually mean something. Yeah, abstraction is one thing, but like, do something with it. I don't want to see characters just attacking simply nothing in the sky. The visuals should be consistently meaningful and enticing. They have no reason not to. Don't just show stuff for the sake of it, especially when they have nothing to do at this point in the show. Naruto's got a serious issue with having a montage of its large ensemble cast, and it often feels like it doesn't mean shit and it's just there to fill space. Imagine! Filler in a fucking OP! I want to take what I've discussed here and analyze my favorite OPs from original and from Shippuden. Original OP2 was storyboarded and directed by Toshiyuki Suru, set to Haruka Kanata by Asian Kung Fu Generation. It is quite literally one of the finest crafted OPs I've ever seen on a pure technical basis. While I think you could argue that other OPs have more thematic or emotional potency, in terms of energy, charm, representing this part of the show, framing your series as best as possible, it's pretty much perfect. It spans episodes 26 through 53. Again, I wish its first appearance wasn't the only recap episode, but otherwise it lands right as they've passed the first stage of the Chunin exams and are about to enter the Forest of Death. So aside from that recap faux pas, it's very appropriate because that's right when the show gets nuts. This OP is both faster in tempo and throws a lot more information at the viewer than the first OP. It lets the audience know that now we're cooking with gas. By the time this OP appears, we've already been introduced to everybody featured in the OP, except for Orochimaru, who's also the only character in this OP that we don't get a proper look at. Other story-related events include Sakura's haircut and Sasuke's curse mark, but both are presented in ways that the audience won't quite register what they are until those moments happen. I'd argue this is the only OP where it's better to show off the characters and have the story beats be scant. It's representing the arc where all these characters are first introduced, so it's good that the OP spends the time endearing the audience to them more. Subsequent Naruto OPs waste so much time on characters we already know about. It's not like we haven't watched hundreds of episodes with them by now. We know who they are, and a lot of the time they aren't even that relevant to current events. At least with this OP, every character you see matters in some way. The OP lasts until episode 53, switching to the next OP right after they introduce Jiraiya, which is a decent time to pass the baton during that lull period between the prelims and the tournament. It starts off incredibly strong, with the most luscious cut of animation in the whole OP. What a power move! The music actually doesn't start right away. It cuts in abruptly since the way the full song is constructed, it doesn't start on that note. But I prefer that they start the song at this point rather than where the full song starts. All killer, no filler. They could have also made it smoother by fading it in instead of an abrupt cut. But come on, that feels like a much weaker choice. I think the abruptness adds to that initial disorientation of the opening, which is complemented by the shaking camera and fast-moving imagery. The shot of Sasuke is extremely cool, with his hair and clothes blowing everywhere, and you can't see his typically dull expression. Tetsuya Takeuchi animated this cut, and I love how it gives the impression that it's one seamless cut. But each cut is synced perfectly to each measure of the song, and the fourth measure is synced to the animation itself. You really can't match the effectiveness of that title drop anywhere else. Cowboy Bebop is the runner-up. It's such a good title drop, it actually hangs on that shot for a while, waiting for the song to pick back up to cut to Naruto smiling at the camera, which is such an upbeat, confident choice. Being the titular character, he gets a few more shots synced to the music. I love the motion blur given to the action shots here. That and the slight panning almost makes you forget they're still images. Very good economic choice, and the shots themselves have good variety and charm. I'm sure that last shot of Naruto really made every kid watching it want to be a ninja. It makes sense why they hold on that pose as long as they do. It's so cool. The next part has actually quite an interesting problem. It wants to show the 3 other members of the team, but it has 8 beats of music to work with. How do they divvy that up in an even and satisfying way so that they land on this shot on the 9th beat? What they do is give 2 beats to each character, and then the last 2 beats are shared by Sasuke and Sakura. The vocals happen to have one spot where it glides over 2 beats. So you put the shot of them there, and sequence it in order of importance. Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi. The Kakashi shots are good. The rare Sasuke smile is very good. And Sakura is very cute here too. However, this is not exactly a flattering shot of the team. If this was their actual photo from the show, that might have been a lot better. Then you could have had that falling apart moment and have that be the final photo. The shot does save itself with the photo snapping as the group falls apart, which is very endearing and lovable characterization. I'm just addicted to the synchronization of this part, with each team flying in member by member with the guitar. I love that you get close-ups of their faces as well as the whole body design. It's the most succinct and memorable sequence I've seen this many characters introduced this quickly. 9 characters in 8 seconds. I wouldn't go far as to say a new viewer is immediately endeared or understands every one of them. I mean, who could ever find themselves endearing to Tenten, am I right, fel? It's so funny when the vocals scream in anger to the first shot of Kabuto. See, what's interesting about this shot right here is that subtlety is for cowards. And then the next shot is, unfortunately, emblematic of what I was talking about, with OPs just flaccidly showing the ensemble off. But at least it works okay here, since it's all the relevant adult characters gathered in one place, who are largely in the background for this stretch of the show, save for Anko and Guy. They continue this intense synchronization with the Sand Trio, but the OP subtly singles Gaara out in this shot, not simply for thematic significance like, see, they single him out, so he's all alone, right? But it's to isolate Gaara so that it matches the next cut with Sasuke and Naruto. With OPs, I don't think it's as crucial that every shot expertly and smoothly flows into the next one. But subtle choices like that are really good to make the flow feel purposeful and not arbitrary. And while I don't think this exact dynamic happens at this point in the show, Gaara doesn't have a major encounter with either of them until Konoha Crush, it's still a great composition, framing Gaara as the next major villain to look out for. There's actually an entire variant to this OP that has a couple minor changes. The second version bathes Gaara in red and the others in blue. I can sort of see why to better contrast allegiance and hostility, but this dynamic lighting hasn't been used at all in this OP so far, so it seems more out of place to me than the first version. But both of them are also synced slightly different. Gaara raises his arms a bit later in version 2, making the next cut it transitions to a bit later as well. This is extremely nitpicky, but I do ultimately like the first version more, for Gaara's arms sinking a little closer to the vocals, and then you have Orochimaru's eyes open closer to the vocals' scream. And yes, Orochimaru's eyes are different too. I don't have much of a preference. Like, I guess the white ones are better because you can better make out that they're eyes and not just purple blobs. All that being said, this is one of the coolest and most iconic sequences of a villain threatening the heroes I think I've ever seen in an OP. Usually what you get is the villain by themselves, or the hero is already fighting them, or about to fight them. To me, Orochimaru is not just framed as a villain, he's a force of nature. The rotation of Naruto to Sasuke, as well as the counter-rotation of the eyes on top of all the wind and dust blowing, it's visceral, and synced to such a feverish point in the song too. Seriously, fuck subtlety in OPs. I want to feel it in the moment, not just notice it after my 20th viewing going frame by frame. I wouldn't be talking about this OP if Asian Kung Fu Gen didn't do such an outstanding job. Those guys know how to compose a real anime opening song. This is one of those OPs known more for its song than its visuals, I think. And for a long time, I was one of those anime fans who cared more about the song being awesome than the visuals living up to it. Perhaps because choosing between the song and the visuals, the song has more utility because you can listen to it in the shower. The reason I'm stressing so much about the visuals in relation to the song is that I think the song is able to speak for itself. But many other Naruto OPs have banger songs, yet unfortunately lack the visual impact those songs deserve. What I really admire about the composition of this song is this breather moment between that previous intense part and the chorus. A lot of the time, the OP song drops the big moment right as the chorus starts. But as we see here, the end of the verse is such a great moment to feature the villain right before that. So there's very little breathing room between them, basically forcing the directors to pick one or the other. Going from such a high-octane verse to similarly high-octane chorus can be kind of exhausting and repetitive. So this brief quieter point breaks up the flow to make this OP not feel tedious. However, this breather could have also easily killed the momentum of the OP without something memorable and exciting. As much as you don't want to tire the audience, you can't afford to lose them either. So they went with these rotating shots. Each cut synced to the guitar and matching each other's rotation to make it seem like one continuous shot. It's absurdly cool, reinforcing those 5 different teams in the audience's memory. Curiously, there are 6 teams in this arc, and 6 beats to synchronize the visuals to. But instead of showing the Sound Ninja team, they show Team Guy twice, which I think is fair because the Sound Ninja are pretty minor characters, but also because you get very good shots of both Neji and Lee, who are much more important characters in this arc. The OP usually drops its coolest moment right as the chorus starts, but I actually really like how restrained the visuals are here instead. It's a mix of action shots and profile shots. If it was one big action set piece, that would probably be really difficult to show good moments for all 15 major characters. The animation even syncs up to the music slightly, with Sasuke's kick, Lee's punches, and Hinata's dodge matching the vocals. But while the other shots might seem static, there's a very subtle perspective trick with the hands of Lee, Neji, and Shino growing towards the screen, giving each of them dimensionality. It's particularly striking with Shino. At this point in the show, we knew his power had to do with bugs. We just didn't know it was that many bugs. Some characters like him and Gaara actually look a lot cooler standing still. Naruto gets 2 separate shots, and I wish one of those were given to somebody else who got nothing, like Shikamaru. Lee also gets 2 shots. Wow, is he a big deal in this OP? Of course, because this stretch of the show is the most attention he ever gets. Out of the 2 Naruto shots, I would keep this shot of Naruto succumbing to Kyuubi. It fucking rocks, and works perfect with that screaming part of the vocals. It takes a page from Suru's prior work on episode 17. So nice, you gotta use it twice. As tempting as it might have been to show Sakura in the act of cutting her hair here, I think it's in very good taste to just allude to that moment instead, as well as tease her rivalry with Ino. This next sequence is the best look we get at Orochimaru, and I really like the mirroring of Kakashi's head in a downward motion and then Sasuke's head in an upward motion on the opposite side, with Kabuto looking sus in the middle, like, oh god, he couldn't make it any more subtle. I think the OP tricks you into thinking this shot of Naruto falling and getting up is one shot, but there's a cut that's synced really well. I think the execution of this punch always stuck out to me as a bit clumsy, but I'm all on board with the intention behind it. There's another small breather between this energetic moment and the final impression. Tsuru chooses a nice Dutch angle of the sun, with a couple of the characters staring off into it. A bit like the start of this OP, like it's wrapping back to where it started, except with more people than just Team 7. Remember, this OP is all centered on this cast of characters, so it's best that the OP also ends on them. The song riffs almost like staccato, and here is exactly why I love giving so much attention to synchronization. Instead of a smooth flow, the visuals painstakingly sync all 13 plucks of the guitar, gradually widening the shot to show the whole cast stanced up facing the camera, and all of a sudden, right towards the end, Naruto is smack in the middle, staring directly at the audience before the last pluck dips the screen to white. Episode start. Wow. Nothing preps you for an episode as well as that does. It's fucking awesome. My one complaint, and I hate pointing it out, I'm pissed they don't just cut right to the episode, but instead you have this remnant sponsor card. Why the fuck is that kept in the episode? I know Bleach does this too. What the fuck is it doing here? Even on Crunchyroll? Oh, I hope that's not on the physical release. It probably is. It's a minor gripe. This never actually bothered me personally when I watched the series myself. But for how much I've been scrutinizing OP placement and these finer details, I just didn't want to ignore it. Okay, that took about 15 minutes, and I could go into that much detail for this next OP, but then this section would be way too long. I'll give myself 3 minutes for this one. OP16 was storyboarded and directed by Masahiro Watanabe, set to silhouette by Kanabun. It started at episode 380, more significantly, October 2nd, 2014. I bring the date up because this is the OP that was playing in the anime while the manga released its final 8 chapters in Shonen Jump. So it makes sense why this OP, more than any other, feels the most cathartic. It's one thing for an OP to be hype, but to give you that warm satisfaction of making it this far, it makes you feel so happy to be a Naruto fan. It's more than the visual symbolism or depth of the lyrics. You're watching passion for the material manifest itself. All the hang-ups about pacing or filler or how many years it's been all melts away for 90 seconds. Everything I've been saying here about what makes a good anime OP is taken pretty much directly from here. Maybe that's why it's considered the meme one. It's so perfect some people can't even take it seriously. The first impression is slick. You know how I love the eye-opening and head-turning shots? Okay, here's 9 of them in a row! For the first time they use footage from throughout the series in this loving montage, this more than anything really giving that cathartic, even nostalgic energy. All the colors in this OP are so effing rich compared to the drab crater the story is set in. These shots of Obito and Madara calmly walking to the beat of the song surrounded by all their enemies, it's just Kino, dude. I'm running out of words to say, I'm sorry. The lens flares flashing in time with the guitar too, it's an excellent touch, and the different phases of each of them as they look up, it feels so rewarding to a longtime viewer. It's unusual for anime to show character growth for the villains, isn't it? It keeps itself consistently relevant to the story from start to finish. It actually caught me off guard that this cute moment of Naruto freaking out does happen in the show. Naruto and Sasuke's relationship is so often shown in these OPs, but basically none of them get it more precisely than this one. Naruto fighting Sasuke isn't as compelling as Naruto chasing after Sasuke, like he did when he was a kid. Those brief cuts to black interrupting the animation to better sync to the music, that's what I'm talking about, dude! Again, I think even people who aren't Naruto fans can appreciate a sequence like this. Seeing Naruto grow up and mature as he runs towards the fight, I have no reason to elaborate on that. And in Sync 2, oh my god. Naruto and Sasuke side by side after all this time just the coolest, and it only gets cooler from here. As much as Madara gets here, fighting and running and flipping, it makes sense for that character given how much he earnestly loves to fight. You almost forget how much is at stake here and how dire the situation is. Everything looks so fucking fun. Okay, now the OP's just showing off. Susanoo riding Kurama as a mount as he chases after Obito. Are you fucking kidding me?
Wait, Shikamaru gets like the Nine-Tails clone? What's going on? Yeah!
And this is such a wonderful, mesmerizing visual. This really stuck with me as someone who saw this OP before watching the show. My favorite part is how long they spend on Obito's stunned face. It's frustrating how indescribable that moment resonates with me. It says it all. Lastly, how they end this OP, it's one of those things where the manga readers will just tell you it's all spoilers, but it goes by so quick and it's all framed so close, you can't tell what you're supposed to be spoiled to. I love how it seems to rush a bunch of these important plot points right at the end, almost like you're in a hurry to get to the episode and see what happens next. Anime fucking rules, dude. Naruto's got a lot of villains, but what's most admirable to me is how many of them aren't completely evil, per se. As all compelling villains ought to be, they have their own motivations that aren't malicious on the surface. The difference between them and the heroes is that these guys will do whatever it takes to achieve them, leading to despicable choices. Their actions are what make them the villains, not simply their philosophies or personalities. They aren't threats because they might do something. This story allows each of them to win in one way or another, so that it's clear that they are the obstacle for our heroes to overcome. But what I've noticed in Naruto especially, that I really like, is how often we also see them lose. It's not a situation where they're constantly on top until the final blow takes them down. The story gives them room to be defeated, retreat, adapt, and evolve. This gives them even more complexity than what several of them already have. As former allies, Orochimaru, Itachi, Danzo, and Madara each have strong connections to the Leaf Village. Nagato was Jiraiya's former pupil before Naruto, and Kaguya is where all jutsu comes from. Some villains manage to find redemption, like Zabuza and Gaara, while others at least try to atone by the end. Or, you know, just turn out to be a good guy the entire time. I love how much there is to each of them. It's not simply a tragic backstory. Interestingly, the most basic villains of the story are all the subordinates, like Kabuto, the Sound 4 Ninja, most of the Akatsuki, and Black Zetsu. They might have a sympathetic angle here or there, but they aren't as complex as the ones they serve. All of this is to say, I found myself really enjoying most of the villains in the story, even rooting for one of them. Not necessarily to win, but at least to not lose. One villain in the story who's first introduced as a subordinate, and his journey is one of the most incredible roller coasters I've ever seen a character like him go through. A lot of it hinges on his identity. This character wears a mask and goes by many names, and through osmosis, being on the internet, I was spoiled to his true identity long before I watched the show, but I still ended up with him as my favorite villain of the bunch. In fact, I think knowing his identity the whole time enhanced my enjoyment, because I wasn't caught up in the mystery of who he was so much, though there's obviously enjoyment to that too, and it's what the author intended. I'm not trying to make a character analysis per se, I just thought it'd be interesting to walk you through my experience with this character and what made him so compelling for me to watch. Spoilers. His name is Obito. Obito Uchiha was a member of Kakashi's team led by the 4th Hokage. So that off the bat makes Obito very important to Naruto's story, if he weren't already dead. Kakashi's last mission with Obito before his demise is the first time we're introduced to this character in any capacity, at least in the manga. I couldn't tell you why the anime chose to make 118 episodes of Shippuden before finally adapting this point in the story, when originally it was meant to be the divider of part 1 and 2. So between original Naruto and Shippuden. I get wanting to start Shippuden on the first 2 arcs right away, because the audience wanted to see the story progress after all that filler. But did they really have to then do 2 entire anime original arcs? and all of Akatsuki suppression, and up to the formation of Sasuke's new team. There's probably a fair enough reason, but it's still very strange in retrospect. I saw that those two episodes, 119 and 120, were meant to be between original and Shippuden, so that's when I watched them, making it my first introduction to this character. There's a lot in these two episodes that are fascinating. It's the first time the viewer sees the 4th Hokage as a character and not just told about him. And we know nothing about these other two characters, so there's intrigue into learning about them because we care about Kakashi. As a first-time viewer, most people would logically consider this to be all about Kakashi. It's literally called Kakashi's Chronicles after all. And we get so much history about him, like the first time he uses Chidori in battle, where his outlook on being a ninja comes from, more detail about Kakashi's father, and finally how he loses an eye and gains a Sharingan. However, out of all 4 principal characters here, I'd say the story singles out Obito as the point of interest. It opens from his perspective, with Obito learning about Kakashi's father, Obito steering the emotional themes of the story, and Obito developing as a character, awakening his Sharingan. It's like he's the main character, and his personality might remind viewers of a certain other main character. His design is like a palette swap of Naruto's. He even has goggles like Naruto's original design. The only catch is that Obito is the one to ultimately lose his life, with Kakashi being the only one still alive to remember any of this. But even before that, there's 2 catches here that makes matters a little more complicated. For one, Obito is an Uchiha, which, you know, it isn't a bad thing on its own, but it does carry some baggage for this character. His clan is under a curse of hatred, which is kind of complicated to explain. And Obito happens to let slip something during his speech to Kakashi that should have set off a warning bell to viewers that this character, he wasn't going to be relegated to fodder. I imagine viewers always latch on to the part where he tells Kakashi that those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum, because that's the part Kakashi lives by and tells Team 7 about at the beginning of the story. But I actually forgot until rewatching the scene that Obito also says,
どうせ同じクズなら俺は掟を破るそれが正しい忍びじゃないってんなら忍びなんてのはこの俺がぶっ潰してやる
Uh-oh. Seemingly unrelated, but for my viewing experience extremely related, towards the end of Kazekage Rescue, the viewer meets a soon-to-be member of the Akatsuki, a bumbling goofball with a mask named Toby. I wasn't simply spoiled on Toby's true identity. I also knew how significant of a villain this character would turn out to be, but I didn't know this was how he was introduced. This was truly exciting for me. I had no idea that one of Naruto's primary villains would be portrayed this goofy. It adds so much fun to his character, but perhaps that's why fans might not have connected with him as effectively at first. He comes off as a joke character, and it's hard to connect to a character without a face, or any interesting powers to speak of. And frankly, his shtick is not all that funny either, at least to an unspoiled viewer. For me, Toby's personality is amusing and fun, because I know it's an act. I really enjoy Wataru Takagi's raspy, clownish voice performance as Toby, having been familiar with his roles as Onizuka, Okuyasu, and Aoki. His playful deception builds both intrigue because we're unsure what the act is for, as well as tension, since he appears to be very weak and vulnerable, so he puts himself in constant danger. It's amusing when Toby doesn't help Deidara almost at all during his fight with Sasuke, but even after getting attacked by Sasuke, Toby still shows interest in him. The Akatsuki are shown to be this extremely dangerous, powerful, and serious organization. So Toby being diametrically opposite all those traits gives this appealing contrast as well as a mystery of why he's there, only to realize he secretly runs the whole thing. The series does this kind of twist a lot. Many might say at least one too many times, but I don't believe any of them top this moment. Toby completely owns it. To me, this is what makes his encounter with the Konoha Shinobi his most compelling appearance by that point. Because even with the viewer knowing he's the ringleader already, he still acts in this carefree, mysterious way.
この術はこれだけです。
This implies that he's actually been hiding his true strength all along, and the moment when he switches voices and pieces out is so effing cool.
信じられないなんてね。
思った通りだ。
Honestly, I wish the act stuck around longer, if only coexisting with his Madara persona. No other villains in the story have such wide emotional versatility, but this moment is when Toby pretty much disappears for good, and he embraces his so-called true identity. I'll admit, hindsight is 20/20. I wasn't reading or watching Naruto as it came out, so I have very limited knowledge of what the community's impressions of this character were, or who they speculated Toby to be. Of course, some people did accurately guess right, but from what I understand, it wasn't actually all that obvious to people. I guess viewers just take his claim of being Madara at face value because the mystery of his identity apparently still works on new viewers to this day, if even people who are reading Naruto today are getting fooled by it. So, all credit to Kishimoto for crafting an effective mystery. But come the fuck on, guys! How do you not guess that? I'm pretty sure even if I wasn't spoiled, I could guess that Toby is Obito. It's right there in the name! Maybe because everyone calls him Madara for so long, people forgot. And sure, the story does a lot of work to throw people off the scent, but there's just too many clues. His one eye is a Sharingan, which is on the side of his face that was pinned under the boulder when he supposedly died. And if the name wasn't obvious enough, is having the same hair too obvious that it becomes a red herring? It's so interesting how often characters in the story are like, oh, that's impossible! You can't be Madara! He's supposed to be dead! But I imagine whenever this theory of Toby being Obito would get floated by, it would just get shot down the exact same way. It's literally ironic how often the story gaslights you into thinking he's Madara, because, oh, you know, nothing's impossible. Things aren't always as they seem. He could be Madara, when the same logic could apply to him being Obito. We never actually see Obito die, did we? Here's how I know I'm right.
Here's how I know I'm right.
If he says he's Madara, and he was concealing this in every possible way by acting as Toby, why does he drop the act, but not the mask? When he reveals his entire face to Kasame, the only character he ever does this for, it should probably be a red flag that even the audience is left out from seeing his face. The story isn't afraid of showing us Madara's actual face multiple times, with flashbacks. What, is he shy he got some horrible face disfigurement? No. If the audience got a look at this Madara's face, they would probably realize something is up. Even when he insists multiple times that he's Madara Uchiha, and all the characters address him as such, that mask means he's never all that he appears to be. So if he's not Madara, then who is he? Certainly not some nobody. Hopefully not someone absurd like the fucking ramen shop owner. How about the character we were introduced to right before Toby, that we didn't actually see die, with the same hair and Sharingan, and eerily similar name, who said, "I'll crush this so-called shinobi"?
Suspicious.
Honestly though, whether you know he's lying or not, it creates this incredible tension around his identity. And if you're like me and know who he actually is already, the mystery still isn't entirely spoiled either. Just because I knew he's Obito doesn't mean I know why he's pretending to be Madara. I can make assumptions, but what truly happened was not spoiled to me. And I won't spoil them for you here, so I was still able to enjoy that mystery, on top of knowing that this is a former teammate of Kakashi's, and all the drama and pathos that comes with that. Anyway, I think I wound up liking him the most of all the villains, even in this remarkable stretch of the story, from Sasuke vs Itachi through most of the Fourth Ninja War, because of his role as the mastermind, and not so much the typically powerful opponent to overcome. At least not yet. I get the impression that a lot of fans come to enjoy villains in battle shonen, particularly for how cool and strong they are. I don't mean to generalize a whole group of fans, even though I am. I'm sure many of them will insist that there's other reasons why Pain or Madara are the best Naruto has to offer. I certainly enjoyed them too. Pain gets to do and say a lot of badass stuff. and his powers lend to a lot of interesting fights, especially the mystery of how to beat him. And I found it refreshing about how Madara openly enjoys fighting and revels in his rivalry with Hashirama. His sense of fun is infectious, and not what I was expecting, given his reputation, both in the story and the fans, as this serious, tough guy. There's just something about Toby, even putting his true identity aside, that's just so compelling to watch. He feels singular to most battle shonen, where he's a villain who hardly participates in combat, and yet he's so capable and omnipresent, like physically there for much of it. Not simply waiting for the heroes to get to him, or this slimy weakling hiding behind a big strong guy. He turns out to be directly responsible for the Nine-Tails attack that killed Naruto's parents, and participated in the Uchiha massacre which killed Sasuke's parents. While his grand Eye of the Moon plan turns out to not be originally his plan, Toby alone executed most of it, setting pieces up and turning his plans into action. Things don't go his way all the time either, which is great because now he has the exact same tension of whether he'll succeed or fail, just like the heroes. Whereas with other stories, it's more about whether the hero will manage to stop the villain, as if what the villain is doing is inevitable. The way Toby maneuvers strategy and makes decisions right in front of us is awesome. He always manages to shrug off his failures, course correct, and keep his composure, which makes those occasional victories feel really earned. That's such an odd thing to say, isn't it? To have a villain's accomplishments feel earned. And somehow he doesn't act overtly sinister or villain-like. Toby has confidence, but not so much ego. Though, this one part about insisting to Minato that he'll take over the world, it's a little confusing since that's not technically ever his plan, which was something I actually admired. The Eye of the Moon plan is diabolical, yes, robbing agency from all life on Earth and forcing them into a dream state. But it would be the individual's dreams, not his. This is less taking over the world and more neutralizing the world. Or in Toby's mind, saving the world from itself. I'd rather not turn this into a replacement for reading the wiki, so I want to mention just a few of my favorite moments before moving on to his next phase. When Toby talks to Sasuke about Madara's brother offering his eyes to him, you see him grip instinctively. And if you know that he's actually Obito telling this story, I like to think that he's relating it to when he gave his eye to Kakashi. Perhaps he regrets it. I think the way that he wears different masks over time demonstrates that it's not about the mask itself, but rather the act of wearing one. When a character wears a mask as part of their base design, it's easy for the audience to associate them strongly with that mask, as if it's their real face. But changing the mask lends to this idea that what's under the mask is much more important. After Sasuke defeats Danzo, Toby tells him to rest. And I think about how long his journey has been. He's speaking from experience. It reminds me of the resolution of the whole story, of what a true shinobi is, to keep enduring until it comes to be. Interesting how the villain is able to embody that well, not just the heroes. Of course, the official reveal of Madara as an Edo Tensei, which makes everyone, including the audience, go, "Wait a minute, if he's Madara, then who's that?" It's fantastic. Though, that far earlier scene of Kabuto showing Toby he's got what turns out to be Madara's body should have been another major flag too. And then, once Naruto and Toby finally engage, and the first thing that happens is that headbutt, it's so exciting. He finally enters the fray and doesn't disappoint as a daunting but also entertaining threat. From saying that he's nobody and Naruto's rebuke of that, to this cute moment where Naruto learns all the names of the tailed beasts and he taunts Toby about it, this cheesy one-liner. Oh, you're so cool. All down to finally figuring out how his damn powers work and realizing Toby's Sharingan has a connection to Kakashi's Sharingan. It's a perfect device to ease the audience into the next dramatic reveal. As I hope I was able to articulate, I felt that his character was awesome and compelling, even apart from his true identity. But boy, it sure doesn't beat the real thing. I tell you, I had the biggest smile on my face the way this reveal was done, through an extended heartwarming montage without any dialogue. And full credit to the manga for using no words at all until the final page. Yeah, the anime recaps all of Kakashi Chronicles. It's a cumbersome choice for the sake of series composition, but it does make up for that, like this. That's not in the manga. The overwhelming sense of dread is like something out of a horror movie. Because for Kakashi, this has become a genuinely living nightmare. Realizing his childhood hero and friend was the same monster who caused basically all of this awful shit to happen. He's felt guilty about what happened back then all this time, and this just made it unimaginably worse. And then one of my favorite scenes happen. Obito speaks with his true voice.
その名で呼びたいのであれば、好きに呼べばいい。俺には何の意味もない。
And it turns out to be Wataru Takagi again, Toby's original voice actor.
恐ろしい術だ。なぜかとあえて問うなら。
When he switches voices and takes on the role of Madara, it's a completely different seiyuu, Naoya Uchida, who would later be cast to play the real Madara. So what viewers thought was Toby's fake voice was actually his real voice. And boy, I think Takagi absolutely slays it here. What was once goofy and cheery has become thoroughly bitter, callous, and sinister. In place of calm calculation is total cynicism and apathy. I think this reveal could have easily slipped into corny. Obito could have either denied it or leaned into it as a way to torment Kakashi. But his complete rejection of his identity is so captivating and brutal.
俺が生きていたかどうかなんてのはどうでもいいことだ。こんなくだらない現実を今さら責めて何になる。これから消える世界のことなどに興味はない。お前らに話すことは何もない。現実に縛られたままカトン死ね。
Again, I'd rather not spoil you on his whole backstory, though I do want to highlight this small moment where he gets spooked. It's very cute. And the breaking point, going sicko mode, was of course fantastic. The real meat and potatoes here though, besides how cool I think Obito is here both in design and personality, is his connection to Naruto coming to the forefront. I'm going to steal something the story codifies much later. Obito is literally Naruto's senpai. I'm not trying to be a total weeb here, I think localizing it as senior or superior would cheapen what I'm trying to say. This whole time, Naruto either has mentors or peers that are important role models in their own way, but those relationships are different from senpai. If I were to relate it to another character in the story, I'd say it's a lot like what Itachi is for Sasuke. That person that's only a little ways ahead of you that you strive to become because you're both so much alike. Of course, Naruto and Obito never knew each other, but they share so much in common. As it turns out most of all, their dreams of becoming Hokage. At the start, they're on opposite sides of the conflict with total malice towards each other. But as a viewer, seeing each one realize bit by bit how they remind one another of themselves, it's so compelling. It's part of that satisfying feeling of how everything in Naruto is connected. When Naruto rebukes Obito saying he won't let his friends die, he's quoting Kakashi all the way back in Land of Waves. But Kakashi was actually biting that line from Obito, so Naruto is throwing Obito's own words back at his face, without even realizing it. Pretty soon, though, Obito sees it for himself, when Naruto knocks Kakashi out of the way of an attack, just like he did for Kakashi, and he decides to lean into that comparison, to torment Naruto, saying Naruto and everyone else will eventually end up like him. It's almost like a form of self-loathing. He sees his old self in Naruto and he's rebuking it. Except, I think he's forgetting something. Or at least not aware of it. The reason Obito turned to hatred for the whole shinobi world as hard as he did was because of his intense love for it, and being an Uchiha fell under the curse of hatred once something traumatic enough happened to him. It had nothing to do with how Obito chose to conduct himself the same way Naruto has. Keep in mind, the second Hokage uses this logic to discriminate against the Uchiha clan, which is a very harmful and wrong choice. The curse of hatred is still a thing because that's how the Uchiha gain their Sharingan. But that shouldn't mean the clan is evil by nature and ought to be discriminated just for that. As seen later, it is possible for Uchiha like Obito to overcome the curse, or for someone like Sasuke and Itachi to reject it completely. Anyway, Naruto doesn't come to realize how similar the two of them are, because Obito has worked very hard to reject his old self. But when their chakras merge in the tail beast tug of war, Naruto sees into Obito's mind and connects the pieces together. But before I get that far... Man, Kakashi vs. Obito is so fucking peak, dude. Not simply the fight, the whole episode, 375, looks immaculate. Like they talked about in the last video, this is one of Hiroyuki Yamashita's triple threat episodes. He nails every emotional beat, but the crown jewel is this fight, which he adds tons of valuable detail to. I find reading chapter 636 to be a bit underwhelming, because Kishimoto is trying to juggle 3 things at once. The fight, a parallel sparring match with Kakashi and Obito when they were young, and Kakashi's thoughts of Naruto, all of which are great pieces but takes up a lot of room on the page, leaving the fight itself feeling scant. It reads more like a highlight reel, just snippets of a fight instead of one with progression to it. In the episode, Yamashita crafts a whole fight with beginning, middle, and end, and he consolidates that Kakashi monologue during just the final blow. This leaves the fight, and it's parallel to their younger selves, to shine, and Yamashita goes above and beyond, weaving the two together seamlessly. Yamashita even bends reality, having the two interact with each other towards the end of the fight. It's enough to make Satoshi Kon proud. But more than just that, the fight itself has it all. Taijutsu, ninjutsu, genjutsu, ninja tool jutsu, and of course, all of it enhanced by each of their dojutsu. And the balance sways from dead even to one advantage to a surprise upset and finishes in basically a draw. If AMVs weren't already dead by 2014 when this episode came out, my god, you wouldn't have seen the end of it. One of the choices that I think surprises me, that you might not appreciate if you're just watching in Sakagaboru, or in this video, is the unusual music choice. It's very sad and slow. For such a high-octane fight, it's quite the mood killer. But that's the idea. As awesome as this fight looks, the whole thing is just tragic. You're watching 2 pieces of trash, self-proclaimed, trying to kill each other. And at least one of them is having a miserable time doing it. That's another thing I really love about this sequence. It's one thing to craft a very flashy, exciting fight, but both the facial expressions and voice acting manage to sell the emotions the characters are going through too. Kakashi is not having a good time, even when he's winning. And Obito is absolutely relishing in it, finally being able to keep up with his old rival in ways he never could before. The technical skill on display is just enormous. Yamashita understands how to sell impact and speed, while also maintaining visual clarity. Flashing back to the sparring match isn't just a strong choice thematically either. It also adds to the fight's visual variety. You ever see those epic stick figure fights on YouTube? They can be super fun, but if it's the same flat perspective the whole time, it can get pretty tedious eventually. In this fight, the camera frames from the side, from above, from behind a character, from a character's point of view, shakes and spins on top of cutting back and forth between 2 fucking fights. I'd also like to be that guy and cite a few directing techniques that you can thank my favorite director, Osamu Dezaki, for popularizing, including slow motion, a few I-beams, and most inarguably, 10 out of 10. Great fight. One of the things I've enjoyed the most about Obito is how capable and skillful he is without necessarily being the strongest. You want to see what happens when he gets that too?
No. Wait. They think this shit come from outer space or something. ROC, double MG.
This is Obito's last stand. His attempt at wresting control away from Madara by absorbing the Ten Tails and becoming a Jinchuriki like Naruto. He quickly shows himself to be the most powerful enemy they've faced so far, which is so exciting to see as a fan of this character. Obito really runs the whole gambit of anime villains. His versatility and progression is unlike anything I've seen from an anime. He comes into his own as quite the trash-talking bad guy swinging his big stick around, humiliating Minato and gaslighting the allied forces to stand down.
Stop it. Get some help.
This is all on top of him already being the mastermind to much of this conflict. And perhaps because Obito is such a significant antagonist at this point, it also allows Naruto to shine brighter than ever before. At first, Tobirama thought Naruto was just as clownish as his father, but becomes impressed by Naruto's observation and quick thinking from fighting Obito. So much so that he likens Naruto to his brother, the first Hokage. Thanks to this opposition from Obito, Naruto makes his father proud and reminds him of Naruto's mother. Sasuke might not have truly rekindled his rivalry with Naruto without Obito being the conflict to demonstrate his growth. And that is what prompts Sasuke to stand up to Obito, inspiring Naruto to chase after Sasuke, which in turn rallies the whole shinobi forces. A positive movement is only as strong as the threat it opposes. No other fight of Naruto's comes this close to summoning this large swell of support for him. It's one thing for your story to have a strong, charismatic, memorable villain, but the best villains truly elevate their adversaries and make the heroes that much more compelling. The Joker makes me love the Batman more. Quaritch endears me more to Jake Sully. That's why I think Obito is Naruto's greatest villain. His opposition is what makes Naruto's journey so challenging, thrilling, and special. Obviously, he's not the only villain that does this. As I said at the start, this series has a lot of villains, but I'll put a pin in that thought for the end. Obito's similarities to Naruto come to the front once Naruto links with Obito's chakra, allowing him to see Obito's memories, while Obito happens to be dreaming of an alternate reality where he didn't turn to hatred and became Hokage. He can gymnastics logic all he wants about how being Hokage is dumb and bad, but Obito still has regrets. Of course, right when he's on the verge of losing. He probably realized, the moment Naruto found out that Obito wanted to be the Hokage too, it was all over for him. Now Naruto is determined not just to defeat Obito, but to win him back. Naruto calls him his senpai, someone who was an integral figure throughout his life that he never knew.
あんたはKakashi先生の友達で、父ちゃんの部下で、サスケと同じ内派で、俺と同じ夢持つ先輩で、木の葉の忍びだった。
Obito once again tries to hide behind a different identity. He's transcended and enlightened as the all-powerful second sage of Six Paths. But it's just another mask. Early on, when he first absorbed the Ten Tails, not only was his appearance more monstrous, he initially acts like a monster too, silently attacking with little control. The power literally tried to tear him apart, and Obito only barely managed to pull himself back together by keeping the memories of his team intact. Try as he might to reject his former self, it's the only identity of his that was real. Obito couldn't retain his consciousness by embracing his memories as Tobi or Madara. He's always been that same kid who wanted people's attention and acknowledgement. That's why it isn't enough for Naruto to defeat Obito physically. Naruto can punch physical masks off all he wants, but he can't punch off an invisible one. So they gotta talk. I wasn't around for all the community discourse when this came out, but one term I did hear about quite often was the talk no jutsu meme. The way Naruto defeats his enemies not with his fists, but by merely talking with them. There's even a whole ass wiki page dedicated to it. If it's just a joke, I don't find it to be all that funny personally. The real joke is if you consider it a genuine criticism. Clearly, talking to Obito is important enough that it's not just Naruto who's given the time to lecture him. Minato stops Kakashi from killing him so that the two of them can talk too. Even before that though, this ethereal realm where time stops and characters are able to just talk is certainly fantastical, but I honestly wish more Battle Shonen had the guts to do this. Have the two opposing forces actually hash things out. I get that many of the Shonen Jump heroes are not the best talkers. They usually let their fists or whatever other talents they have do that for them. But hey, neither is Naruto. I'm not looking for Socrates-level debate here. When characters have the room to express their thoughts and feelings, you get to learn so much more about them that would otherwise be left implied, and they become more than just action figures. That's why you have that trope of the bad guy explaining his whole plan. You don't just establish the stakes that way, but you often get why they're doing it at all. and why you should care. Maybe it's not manly enough for some teenage boy readers, but that probably means they haven't seen Fist of the North Star. Besides, Naruto literally says exchanging fists is how these exchanges happen. You just get both anyway! The viewer isn't getting robbed out of a cool fight, which I feel like this talk no jutsu thing seems to imply. I want to leave the rest of Obito's journey from here unspoiled. This is pretty much where his time as a villain ends. As I said, I don't think any other villain really elevates Naruto specifically, and the series as a whole, the same way Obito does. Don't get me wrong, if Obito was the only good villain, I don't think Naruto would be all that good of a series. After all, he doesn't show up at all until part 2, a third of the way into the story. What I appreciate about that, though, is that once he is introduced, he's present and crucial for the bulk of his screen time. Most of the other villains don't have as much longevity. It reminds me of this trend in Battle Shonen where the bad guys are often sequential. They appear one after the other. Dragon Ball's arcs are literally named after each respective threat. And if I were to choose either sequential villains or reoccurring villains, my tastes tend to lean more towards the latter, because reoccurring villains can be constantly enriched, reinforced, and developed. I grow attached to them as much as I grow attached to the characters I'm supposed to be rooting for. As an aside, I'd argue that's one of MHA's greatest strengths, keeping Shigaraki as the major villain. The best sort of media gets me to enjoy a fight between two characters when I actually care about both of them, in spite of knowing the often predictable outcome. Some series just aren't quite the same once these major adversaries are defeated for good, like Aizen in Bleach, or L in Death Note, or Rao in Fist of the North Star. But thankfully, Naruto does not have that problem, since the story wraps up pretty soon after Obito's defeat, and it ends on one of the best ending fights I've ever seen in this medium. There's one more track on this album of video essays, and is so long it will take up an entire video of this length on its own. I'll have it for you real soon. Thanks for being patient with me. Yo, peace.